Most people spend their lives running away from themselves. They distract themselves, hide parts of who they are, wear masks to survive socially, pretend certain emotions do not exist. Fear, anger, loneliness, jealousy, shame. But what happens to the parts of ourselves we refuse to face? Do they disappear? Or do they quietly grow inside the unconscious mind? Carl Jung believed human suffering often begins exactly there. Inside the hidden regions of the psyche. The places people spend entire lives avoiding. Tonight, we explore Jung's philosophy of suffering, the shadow, the unconscious, and why healing may require confronting the darkest parts of ourselves instead of escaping them. Modern society teaches people how to perform, how to appear successful, confident, productive, socially acceptable, but rarely teaches people how to understand themselves deeply. And because of this, many people become psychologically fragmented. They suppress emotions to survive socially, hide vulnerability, bury insecurity, ignore trauma. But according to Jung, repressed emotions do not disappear. They move into the unconscious mind. And from there, they continue influencing behavior invisibly. A person may believe they are rational, while secretly controlled by fears they never confronted. This creates internal conflict. The conscious self says one thing. The unconscious feels another. And eventually, the tension becomes suffering. Part 2, The Shadow. One of Jung's most famous ideas is the shadow. The shadow contains the parts of ourselves we reject. Not only darkness or evil, but everything we hide from conscious identity. For example, insecurity, anger, envy, selfishness, forbidden desires, emotional pain. Society encourages people to create socially acceptable identities. But the rejected parts remain alive internally. And according to Jung, the more people deny their shadow, the more dangerous it becomes. Because what remains unconscious controls people indirectly. This is why humans often project darkness onto others. A person may hate in others what they secretly fear within themselves. Jung believed much human suffering comes from refusing self-confrontation. People fear their own complexity, fear their hidden emotions, fear seeing themselves honestly. But healing cannot begin without awareness. Part 3, Suffering as a Message. Modern society often treats suffering as meaningless malfunction, something to suppress immediately. But Jung believed suffering often contains psychological meaning. Anxiety, depression, existential emptiness. These may sometimes signal deeper imbalance within the psyche. Perhaps the soul is neglected. Perhaps a person lives against their authentic nature. Perhaps emotional wounds remain unresolved. Jung believed symptoms are often messages from the unconscious mind. And the more people ignore these messages, the louder suffering becomes. This does not mean all suffering is good. But Jung believed pain can force psychological confrontation. Sometimes breakdown becomes the beginning of transformation. Part 4, The Masks People Wear. Jung called the social mask people present to the world, the persona. The persona helps humans function socially. But problems emerge when people identify entirely with the mask. A person becomes trapped performing an identity instead of living authentically. Modern society intensifies this dramatically. Especially through social media. People carefully construct digital versions of themselves. Attractive, successful, confident, emotionally controlled. But internally, many feel disconnected from who they truly are. The greater the gap between the persona and the authentic self, the deeper suffering becomes. People become emotionally exhausted maintaining performances. And perhaps this explains why modern humans often feel strangely empty despite external success. Because the soul cannot survive permanently through performance alone. Part 5. The Unconscious Mind. Jung believed the unconscious mind is far larger than people realize. Dreams, symbols, instincts, archetypes, hidden fears, ancient psychological patterns. All exist beneath conscious awareness. And modern society often disconnects humans from this deeper inner world. People live externally. Working, consuming, scrolling endlessly, distracting themselves constantly. But the unconscious still exists beneath the surface. And when ignored, it expresses itself indirectly through suffering. Jung believed dreams were especially important. Not random meaningless images, but symbolic communication from the unconscious. Messages attempting to restore psychological balance. The unconscious continuously seeks wholeness. But conscious identity often resists it. Part 6. Individuation. For Jung, the goal of life was not perfection. It was individuation. The process of becoming psychologically whole. This means integrating light and darkness, strength and vulnerability, conscious and unconscious parts of the self. Most people avoid this process because it is painful. Self-confrontation is frightening. Humans prefer illusion. But Jung believed avoiding inner truth creates greater suffering long-term. Individuation requires courage. The courage to see oneself honestly. Without mask. Without denial. Without pretending perfection exists. And perhaps true maturity begins exactly there. Not when suffering disappears, but when humans stop running from themselves. Part 7. Why modern people feel empty. Jung believed modern civilization creates spiritual disconnection. People are materially connected, but psychologically lost. Technology provides stimulation, but not meaning. Social media provides attention, but not inner peace. Modern culture often ignores symbolism, spirituality, introspection, nature, myth, emotional depth. And because of this, many people experience existential emptiness. The human psyche needs meaning, not merely consumption. Jung believed humans suffer deeply when disconnected from inner purpose, authentic identity, and psychological wholeness. Perhaps modern anxiety is not only biological. Perhaps it is spiritual fragmentation. Part 8. The Necessity of Darkness. Jung believed darkness is necessary for growth. He famously wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Humans often want healing without confrontation. Peace without self-awareness. But Jung believed true transformation requires descending into the unconscious. Into fear. Into pain. Into the shadow. Because hidden suffering cannot heal while unconscious. And perhaps this is why many people fear silence. Silence reveals what distraction hides. The unresolved parts of the psyche begin speaking. And modern life gives humans endless ways to avoid listening. Part 9. Suffering and Transformation. Unlike philosophers who saw suffering as purely meaningless, Jung believed suffering can transform consciousness. Pain can deepen empathy. Loneliness can create introspection. Crisis can awaken authenticity. This does not romanticize suffering. But Jung believed psychological growth often begins during internal collapse. Many people discover themselves only after heartbreak, depression, failure, grief, Existential crisis. Why? Because suffering destroys illusion. And once illusion collapses, the individual finally confronts reality honestly. Perhaps healing is not becoming someone new. Perhaps it is becoming whole. Part 10, Final Reflection. Carl Jung believed humans are far more complex than modern society admits. Beneath identity, beneath social performance, beneath distraction, there exists a deep unconscious world shaping human suffering constantly. And perhaps the greatest danger is not darkness itself, but unconscious darkness. The parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. Jung teaches that healing begins with awareness, with honesty, with confrontation. And perhaps the path toward inner peace is not escaping suffering, but understanding what suffering is trying to reveal. Maybe the human soul does not want perfection. Maybe it simply wants wholeness.